Muito obrigado, convidando-me. And first off, I'm Russian, as you know, and most men in the world, I'm a football fan. But when I finish today, I hope your memories of Russians in 2006 will not only be referees, red cards and yellow cards. Of course, my expertise from a very different type of sport. I dedicated my life to strategic thinking at the chessboard, and now I'm directing those energies into books, public speaking, and changing the disastrous state of government in Russia. So my 25 years at the top of the chess world, and I retired last March 2005, last year, taught me much more than just to play chess. So seeking out new challenges and new ways to innovate, it's critical for not only for individuals, also for the companies. And now I have even broader challenges in my life, which is no longer limited to chess. So the battle for democracy in Russia provides me with new opposition, and in this competition, my Kremlin opponents change the rules at their convenience. So the only rule, there are no rules. So this new fight, requires all my old skills, and as well as the ability to develop new ones. And when I'm asked what I would do with Mr. Putin, I can only reply in the words of your famous general, Humberto Delgado, ovviamente, de me too. And don't worry, so I should tell you that this chess expertise is not required here today. But the elements that lead us to excellence in any field are usually very similar. So seeing into the future has always been a goal for mankind. And I'm quite used to it from chess. Successful predictions mean profit. Bad ones mean disaster. Accurate forecasts mean safety, opportunity, and success. In fact, if I seem distracted at any point, it's because I'm always looking 5 or 6 pages ahead. The ancient Greeks had their famous oracle at Delphi. Today we have economists and strategic consultants. So legend, if we believe it, has it that King Croesus of Lydia consulted the Apollo oracle at Delphi before starting a war against Persians at 547 BC. So receiving what he believed was a favorable response, Croesus headed into the battle. He was quickly crushed and his empire destroyed. Of course, he had heard what he wanted to hear when the oracle ambiguously told him if he attacked, a great empire will fall. Well, it did. And Apollo, the original consultant, didn't offer a refund. Those today who use Oracle databases can only hope that they are more reliable than their ancient counterparts. So my first goal here is to reclaim the word strategy. This word, strategy. These days, you hear this word applied to nearly everything, no matter how trivial. Every day, people use this word more and more, and consequently, every day, it's worth less and less. Management guru Peter Drucker wrote that long-range planning does not deal with future decisions, but with the future of present decisions. Future tactics are not strategy. Tactics are predicated on calculations and if. So if he does this, I'll do that. If he captures my pawn, I attack his knight. If our competitor raises prices, we, say, increase the production. These are programmed reactions. There are no goals, and strategy, to the contrary, is all about goals. Understanding the future of present decisions is a profound concept. It's evaluation combined with calculation. And once we understand strategy, employing it is just a question of desire. It's easy. It's very easy to get caught up in quick reactions, tactics, and mistake them for strategy. And this is dangerous because bad plans can succeed with good tactics, and vice versa. So what type of action is required in response to an event? Tactical reaction or change of strategy? This is one of the most important questions any leader in business, in politics faces. Is an event of sufficient magnitude to force us to reevaluate the goals upon which our strategy is based? We have to analyze our resources and to keep this goal-oriented focus even when we're reacting very quickly. Our strategy guides our decisions by informing us which of the possible results are satisfactory and which are unacceptable. Our strategy also tells us which of our resources are most valuable and which are expendable. A chess saying goes, tactics is knowing what to do when and where there is something to do, while strategy is knowing what to do when and where there is nothing to do. So when there is no immediate threat, no clear opportunity, that's when strategic thought is absolutely paramount. Companies and managers that are quick to blame faulty strategy and change it regularly really don't have any strategy at all. They're simply moving from one tactical skirmish to the next without any strategic direction. The world is full of famous brands named for their founders. Dell Computers, Estee Lauder Cosmetics, Ford Motors, and then we have Otis elevators. We all use elevators every day today thanks to the invention of Elijah Otis in 1852. No, he didn't invent the elevator. He created the safety device that stops elevator from failing if the cable breaks. As essential as this is, Otis still had trouble finding customers. There was no internet in 1852, and he couldn't buy a television commercial. But luckily, he learned to be a showman as well as an engineer. He rented a space in an exhibition in New York. He stood on his elevator platform, 15 meters above the ground, and in front of the huge audience, he dramatically chopped the cables with an axe. The platform dropped only a few centimeters, amazing the crowd and getting publicity in the newspapers and magazines across the country. And eventually, he got a lot of orders. But I think that one of the best examples of good strategy and good tactics comes from something we do not do, from a name we do not hear in the business world today. When I came here to Lisbon, I did not fly on a Wright brothers airplane. In December 1903, the Wright brothers made a famous flight at Kitty Hawk. Nearly 200 engineers and scientists died before them trying to invent an airplane. The Wright brothers succeeded where others had failed because they realized that it's not enough to get the plane in the air. They had to make it stable so it would not flip over in mid-flight. And they succeeded. It's less well known that the invention of the airplane also took place not only North America, but also in the South America. But the Brazilian inventor Alberto Santos Dumont was a wealthy idealist who was little interested in the commercial possibilities of the airplane. The Wright brothers' breakthrough was one of the greatest, arguably, one of the greatest inventions in human history. But they did not believe it was good for business. They did not believe the plane was good for hauling cargo or transporting people long distances. They laughed at the possibility that the plane would ever cross the Atlantic. They lacked the commercial vision to complement their technical expertise. And in fact, this pessimism was shared by American scientific community. In 1910, American Scientific Magazine wrote that to affirm that the plane could revolutionize the world, could revolutionize the future, is to be guilty of the wildest exaggeration. The result is that by the end of the World War I, America, it's 1918, with its blossoming economy and by far the largest automobile production in the world, was the last country among those with an aircraft industry. Everything was changed by a carrier engineer with unique entrepreneurial instincts entering the aviation business. His name was William Boeing. Back in 1910, when these predictions, so-called scientific predictions were made, William Boeing didn't even know how to fly. And he was living in Seattle, far from where most aeronautic research was going on in the East. Boeing didn't have the technical knowledge of the Wright brothers or the financial resources of Alberto Santos Dumont. What he had was a vision of potential of flight and the ability to develop a strategy to achieve it. In the next few years, William Boeing did several remarkable things to accomplish his vision of creating a commercial airplane business. He saw the potential before the market and understood that the constant technological excellence was the required foundation for a company in this new field. Boeing paid for a wind tunnel to be built at the University of Washington, near Seattle, so the school could offer aeronautic courses, so he would have human resources he needed nearby. In 1917, the American military was getting ready to enter World War I. They needed planes, and Boeing had a new design he thought they could use. The problem was that American Navy was testing new planes 5,000 kilometers away from Seattle in Florida, too far to fly for these little planes. Boeing recognized that this was a crucial opportunity, and he had his planes taken apart, boxed like pizzas, and shipped across the country. This is where you expect to hear that they lived happily ever after because Boeing won this order from US Navy. But that's not the way it happens in the real world. That modest success allowed Boeing to continue for a few more years, during which time his struggling airplane factory also produced boats and even furniture. Those were a few of the creative tactics Boeing used to keep his vision and strategy alive. During this time, he continued to hire the most talented engineers and invest in research, even when there was no market. And when mail delivery and passenger travel, propelled by Charles Lindbergh's historic New York to Paris flight in 1927, created a real boom, William Boeing and his strategy of superior technology were ready and waiting. To succeed, we must master both tactics and strategy, the way William Boeing did. The legendary Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote that the strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. And tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. So we might prefer a little bit more colloquial, a modern version. Planning without action is futile. Action without planning is fatal. Implementing our strategy requires a combination of evaluation and calculation. In your world of business, you have to understand not only what is happening, but why. of the millions of points of data, which are the key factors. In chess, if you show the same position to two different top players, they can have different evaluation based on the mix of experience and calculation. In a mathematically finite system, you can calculate everything. Chess is too big for this. Many people just don't recognize that from human perspective, chess is a mathematically infinite game. The number of positions in the game of chess, all possible positions, contains 45 zeros. 45 zeros, which is approximately as big or even bigger than the number of atoms in the solar system. I think we can agree that it's more than enough. There's one chess example, so to discuss strategy in depth. In 2003, I played a match against a computer, X3D Fritz, in New York. That was one of the quite a few matches I played against the computers. And after losing game 2, making a terrible blunder, I had to come back in game 3 when I played with white pieces. And I had to come up with a strategy that would be sufficient to overcome the tactical advantages that every computer has over human beings. Because we can make mistakes in calculations, computers do not make mistakes in calculations. And I was quite lucky that after the opening, we reached what we call in chess closed position, when the pawns are cutting the board in two sides. So I can play on one side, my opponent can play on the opposite side. But that's a game which invites long maneuvers without precise calculations. And obviously, for machine, it was a very bad choice because even calculating hundreds of millions or billions of positions over a few minutes didn't help very much. As I said, chess is a mathematically infinite game. And it's a time in the game when you have to think in strategic terms. You have to make predictions. You have to see what will happen in 5, 10 moves while you improving your position on one side, your opponent is on the opposite side. And it was quite an amazing game because while I've been mounting pressure on one side where I was stronger, machine was totally ignorant of all the dangers. And while every competent player, and I say competent player, not a grandmaster, not a very strong player, a competent player could recognize the dangers, machine was quite happy. That's a term programmers use very often. They say machine likes the position. Machine is happy. It was happy, it was showing pretty good evaluation because it did not see an imminent and immediate danger. It was all fine. And machine was wasting time by moving pieces from one side to another without creating real pressure where it had to create on the side of the board where machine was stronger. And just 5 or 6 moves before resignation, machine actually recognized the big danger and showed a dramatic drop in evaluation. Of course, it was too late, and eventually the programmers decided to, in behalf of machine, to resign to avoid further humiliation. I think this example helps us see that calculations and research can be done to develop strategy and must be done to support strategy, but they cannot replace strategy. Emanuel Lasker, world champion more than a century ago, a second world champion, exaggerated only slightly when he said that a bad plan was better than no plan at all. Having no plan is practically a guarantee of a failure. With a bad plan, at least we'll learn what not to do. As Thomas Edison bluntly said, I never failed. I only discovered 10,000 ways that didn't work. So for a more modern example, the situation in Iraq might be summarized as the bad execution of no plan. Oh, you can wake up a manager and go to bed a manager. But at some point during the day, you need to step back and be a visionary, a strategist. Everyone talks about looking at the big picture. But doing this and making time for it comes only with practice and dedication. From the practical number crunching, you must consciously look at why these numbers are important. It has been said that the man who knows how will always have a job, and the man who knows why will always be his boss. Before we go on the attack, I would like to add one cautionary story. We must have strategy to guide us when it's an obvious opportunity or required reaction, and when there is nothing obvious at hand. But aggression not always required, and draw in chess could be an acceptable result. If there is no opportunity for direct action, don't create a new weakness. It's a rule in chess. Just don't create new weakness. And two, try to frustrate your opponent's strategy. Even waiting, sounds strange, can have a strategic purpose. Another chess example. The 9th world champion, Tigran Petrosian, won the championship in 1963, the same year I was born. He was famous for being an inaction hero. He rarely attacked, but he was a master of defense and was always impossible to beat. You can consider him an exponent of Forza Azzurri, defensive style. I would even argue that Petrosian invented catenaccio before the Italians. There was nothing of gioco bonito. So my style was the opposite. You can probably guess it. When I was young, my chess hero was the 4th world champion, Alexander Alokhin. He was a brilliant attacker and grew up wanting to play. I grew up wanting to play his exciting style. Also, probably fit, my own character. If Petrosian represented catenaccio, Alokhin could be considered the Eusebio of chess. And like the legendary comeback of Eusebio's Portuguese team against Korea in 1966, 40 years ago, Alokhin once came back to become the world champion again, for the second time. Alokhin also has the dubious record of being the only world chess champion to die while holding the title. 60 years ago, on March 24, 1946, the great Russian player was found dead in the Hotel de Parque here in Estoril. Yeah, maybe that's why the organizers put me in the Hotel Lisbon. When I played Petrosian, just as a game, Tigran Petrosian in Netherlands at the big international tournament in 1981, I was just 18, it was already our third encounter at the chessboard. The first was a draw, and the second one, just 6 months before this game, we played in Moscow, and I reached a very promising attacking position, but blew it up and lost. Obviously, I wanted to take revenge. I also had white pieces, and I was all waiting for a big battle. And again, I got a very promising position. I sacrificed a pawn and put enormous pressure on his position. And I was just waiting for him to collapse. He didn't. It was like, boxer against jiu-jitsu fighter. So I tried to kick him, and he made a little adjustment. Now his position, I was right, his position was not good. After long analysis, and especially later when we had computers, we could actually analyze it. We saw that white had a number of options. to increase the pressure. But at the chessboard, when the clock is ticking and it's a pressure on you, I was looking for an immediate, blow up. It didn't work this way. And, one move, no decisive effect, 2, 3, and I got frustrated. And Petrosian didn't lose his temper, and at a certain point, he made a move that blew my mind, because it was all against the rules. But he knew that there were enough defensive resources in the position. So I lost my temper, and I lost the game. And it was a great lesson, because he taught me several lessons in these 2 early games. And later on, in the next 2 years, we played 2 more games, and I won both games, because I played more quietly. I employed a different strategy, and I remember that before playing another game with Petrosian, just 8 months after the game we played in the Netherlands, I got advice from Boris Spassky, who was the 10th world champion, and who beat Petrosian in 1969 for the world title match. In fact, Spassky lost to him in 1966, because he also was probably, he was rushing too much, and he was too aggressive. In 1969, he adjusted, and he won the match. And Spassky gave me an advice before the game. He said, Gary, don't rush too much. So squeeze his balls, he said. But not 2, just 1. So that was my preparation for the game. and it's at a crucial moment of that game, I remembered his words and didn't push pawn 2 squares, but just 1. And it was so precise and so quiet that Petrosian was quite surprised that I didn't attack the same way I did before, and he collapsed. So I worked with good advice. Now, innovation. So today we'll hear a lot about the importance of innovation. So many fear innovation because it means change and risk and inconsistency. And risks and uncertainties are unavoidable, whether we like it or not. So we must learn to exploit them to our advantage. Producing new ideas and staying on the cutting edge is a result of many factors. The most important is a mindset of fearless exploration and challenge. On my 6th birthday, I woke up to find the greatest present I have ever received. Next to my bed was an enormous globe. I had to rub my eyes to make sure it was real. I had always been fascinated by maps and geography from my early days, from my childhood. And my favorite stories were when my father and myself would recount the voyages of Vasco da Gama, Christopher Columbus, and Fernão Magalhães. I'm not sure I pronounced correctly. I just discovered this morning that if I say in English Magellan, many people cannot recognize the name. So our favorite game became tracing the journeys of these great explorers across the globe. It wasn't long before I knew all the capitals of all the countries, the population, and everything else I could find from the books. These real-life tales of adventure fascinated me more than any fairy tale could. While we didn't focus on the terrible hardships that sea travel involved in those days, I knew it must have taken incredible courage to be the first person to make such a journey. These stories fired my own pioneer spirit, and I always wanted to blaze new trails, just to find something new, even if at that point in my life, in those days, it only meant to take a new route from my school to walk home. All through my career, I have sought out new challenges, looking for things no one had done before. So your José Saramago expressed the sentiment more poetically, so forget my Portuguese. As crianças crescem mais à sombra do que ao sol. So children grow better in the shade than in the sun. And I'm sure that there are different ways to interpret this poetic phrase. To me, it says that one, things should not be easy for us. To develop, we must struggle. It also says that we need the chance to do things on our own. So we should be all aware of the punishment for a failure to innovate if we want to avoid risk and uncertainty. It's another story now from Hollywood. Max Sennett, it's almost forgotten name now, became a legendary producer of the silent movies in the early days of Hollywood. His most famous discovery, by the way, was Charlie Chaplin. In 1914, his studio found a winning formula: a gang of foolish police officers that were always outsmarted by the star of the show. Seeing a big man in uniform with a stick defeated by an ordinary guy was a magic recipe for his audiences. And Sennett understood this immediately. His Keystone Cops were a big hit with poor immigrants who made up the main audience of the cheap local theaters called nickel audience. It was the first time in business history pennies and nickels turned into millions in the consumer market. But Max Sennett couldn't keep up with the fast pace of change in Hollywood. One of the most innovative, creative minds continued to make the same product until nobody wanted it anymore. How could it happen? In fact, he lost his grip on the market even before movies with sound came around. Sennett made great movies, and he did his work so well that he couldn't bear to change it. We must realize that no matter how good we are, no matter how well things are going, we must find ways to innovate and to surpass ourselves, not just our competition. That's, in my view, one of the key lessons. I call it the gravity of the past success. We always rely on our success. We believe that if we won, if we are successful, it's because we are great. We very rarely pay attention to the mistakes our opposition did. And I think that the way to stay on top is to learn from your own successes, the way we try to learn from our failures. Because our opposition will be learning from our success and their failures. And we should not stop thinking that constant innovation is the only way to stay on top. The mentality of challenge and innovation are crucial and critical. And good leaders know how to inspire these feelings. In 1961, President John Kennedy launched a space program to put a man on the moon. He set this ambitious goal not just because it was important to put an American on the moon before the Soviets did it. He did it to create a powerful economic, scientific, and psychological push for the American people. Having grand goals and having a leader with vision, taking ambitious decisions, this is what the free world is badly lacking today. And today, October 11, is a fine day just to, for examples on innovations and adventurous spirit. On October 11, 1811, 195 years ago, the first steam-powered ferry began operations between New York and New Jersey. And on this date, October 11, in 1968, Kennedy's vision came closer to reality. Apollo 7, the first manned Apollo space mission, was launched. New technologies and new opportunities are now completely connected. To achieve our maximum effectiveness as decision makers, we have to challenge ourselves. I already said it's difficult to change a winning formula, but anyone who wants to excel over a long career will find it necessary. To perform at our best, we must be learning all the time and work under pressure. And a bit more of chess. Now chess science. Over the past 5 years, I've been working on a series of chess books dedicated to all greatest players in the history, called My Great Predecessors. It's translated in many languages, and I'm very proud that I pushed myself to work on this project almost 10 years ago, and now it's developed in the long series, which is concentrating on analyzing the development of the ideas in the game of chess. But of course, all the ideas related to the great players. And there was one very important and somehow surprising discovery I made during this work. When you analyze the game, so you are sitting at the luxury of your study, you can move the pieces around. Now you can have even a computer, helping you to analyze the games. You expect that what you find in this calm situation with no pressure, the moves, the ideas, must be superior to what the players found at the chessboard when they could move the pieces, when they were under pressure, scared to make a mistake, especially if this is a very important match that can decide, winning or losing, success or failure of the entire career. Wrong. That's what I discovered, and it was a big surprise. Analyzing the games, and then looking also at the commentaries that made after the games, very often by the same players, I found out that under the pressure of the World Championship match, of the big competition, these great minds worked more productively, more effectively than when they could relax and just analyze the position in the quiet atmosphere of their study. There's only one explanation. When we're not under pressure, some of our senses are switched off. So acting under pressure helps us to mobilize all our resources. And I think this lesson, and I found it a number of times, it's quite important for us also to learn that we have to make sure that we are not escaping these dangerous moments, and we are ready to work under pressure of the fierce competition. I would say that competitive pressure makes us push deeper. And when we aren't under this pressure, senses are not working with the same effect. The things we naturally think of our advantages, time and information, can often short-circuit what matters even more. And what matters even more? Our intuition. So it's about relying on intuition, something that we used to underestimate, because today we're all dealing with numbers. And intuition is not about numbers. It's a mixture. Intuition is a combination of understanding and confidence. We can't sit around and expect experience to accumulate along with great hair. And learning from our mistakes, it's the least of what we should ask from our experience. To get more, we must demand it. We must cultivate it. We must go looking for it. Intuition, it's where it all comes together. Our experience, our knowledge, and our will. No one is right all the time. But this doesn't mean we shouldn't always start out by believing we are right. The courage to decide comes from that belief in yourself. You can have a talent of Eusebio or Alekhine, but you must have the courage and will to achieve. You can have a strategic ability of William Boeing, but you must have the courage to implement your plans. We must have the courage to trust our intuition, to trust our potential, to trust ourselves. And we can also trust Winston Churchill, who once said, courage is the first of human qualities. because it is the quality which guarantees all the others. Thank you. So, if I can satisfy your curiosity even further, I'm at your service to answer the questions. Wow.
100%. Podes correr.
Look here.
In this building where Alekhine played the last game of his life was a match with Lupi. He died in an hotel, in Park Hotel, as he mentioned. But
In this building. Yeah. Let me just, I can make another comment that in every speech, I'll try to find something related to the country, to the venue, and to the date when the speech is delivered, as you could hear. And I'm amazed that you can always find something. Providing, I've been doing speeches all over the place, in Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, Linz, Athens, Hartford, Connecticut, Madrid, Sao Paulo, Bogota, and there's always something. It's just, I always expect that there will be a day and the venue where, I'll run out of ideas. It didn't happen yet.
Bem, não sei se mais alguém tem alguma questão. Por favor, ali o microfone centro do... Um apenas.
I think you are making a change in your life. How did you start making that happen?
How did I start?
Yeah.
You'd better ask my mother.
Okay.
I discovered that while reading some of my biographies that the past is changing. So it's it happens that people invent certain stories, and at one point I decided it was totally useless to stand against the wind. I think the most correct version is that I looked at my mother and my father trying to solve a chess problem, and I learned how to make moves, and then they discovered it and they thought that I could do better playing chess but studying music. So but that's as far as the memory goes, because you should recognize that in 1968 or 1969, when it did happen, nobody paid attention to this fact. So it's just later, 10 years later, everybody was asking, and somebody was trying to come up with a story, and obviously our memory can betray us or pick up certain elements we think were relevant. So that's why any biography, any autobiography, is always based on the selective facts. So that's why I'm trying to be extremely cautious in giving exact description of what's happened in my life many, many years ago.
Temos espaço para mais uma última questão. Não sei se mais alguém tem.
It's here.
Yeah, I see, yes.
So you think humans will always find a way to win computers?
Who asked the question?
Me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I saw the microphone there, so that's why I was trying to figure out why the sound comes from a different place. It's a very good question, and I don't think we have an exact answer. My inclination to say yes for quite a long period of time, but it depends on the rules. Because so far, all the matches we played, it was just a normal chess match with number of games. You played 4, 6, or 8 games. It's clear that if you play number of games, a machine has a very significant advantage because machine doesn't care about anything. It doesn't care about the weather. It doesn't care about private problems. It doesn't care about market crash. So, and there are many, many things, unpleasant things, and can influence, negatively influence human player. I think that if we want to stick with the formula of scientific and social experiment, man versus machine, we should simplify the rules that if the best human player at his best day beats the best computer, that's it. We can play 4 games, 6 games, 8 games, but it's about winning 1 game. Because at the end of the day, we have to be sure whether we are still superior at, at the top level. I think that there are a number of adjustments to the rules yet to be made, also related to a use of the computer database, but it's more technical. If we depart from traditional chess content, long match, who wins, who loses, and stick with one victory only, I think for quite a while, I would say for quite a long time, the best chess players at their best days will be able to beat the best computers. Because machines, if you want, I can expand on it. So let's give you a little bit more. It's the greatest problem of a chess computer is that every computer, no matter how good is this, always suffers from the lack of flexibility. What I mean by saying lack of flexibility, because again, we all know chess is mathematically infinite game, so you cannot calculate from the first move to the last move. Today, the chess computers manage to analyze only all 5 pieces position and some of the 6 pieces positions. So there are 32 pieces at the chessboard. So some people say that maybe they can manage all 6 pieces positions and move to the 7. But that's as far as they can go because then it's an exponential growth. Endgame with 32 pieces is impossible to calculate. It means that you have to evaluate the position. Evaluation is based on a number of factors. Now, when I look at the position, and I just mentioned it briefly in my speech, that if I look at the same position and Anatoly Karpov looks at the same position, we may have a very different view. Now, I don't think evaluation will differ, but Karpov will look at the maybe positional factors. I will look more at the, at the opponent's king, safety, whether I can organize the attack. But we know that things are relative. Sometimes you should play attacking chess. You should pay attention to the dynamic factors. Sometimes you should be more cautious. In machine, there is always evaluation scale, and it has numbers attached to each value. King safety, say on the top, 100 points. Then you have active pieces, control of the center, good or bad pawn structure, etc. If the position requires a different set of evaluation, machine doesn't recognize it. It will always evaluate the position based on the numbers provided by the programmers. The funny thing is that some people don't believe it, but the funny thing is that machines are more predictable than human players when they play. So I need probably 10 to 15 games of any program, and I would tell you which program it is. Because they have very distinctive style. And it's, believe it or not, but it depends very much on the nationality of the programmer. it's, you know, if you compare two programs, one is Israeli program, one is German program, you will not be mistaken to tell which one is more aggressive and which one is more solid. No, it doesn't mean that one is better than, and another is worse. It's just, you know, the way they play, the same way I play and Karpov plays. It's opposite style. But if we know that we have to adjust, machines always in a crucial moment will use the knowledge provided by the programmers. The good news for the programmers now, they now, due to internet and all technologies, they exchange the flow of information. And machines today are getting more sophisticated. It's not only material and material and material. Sometimes machines can sacrifice material to get an initiative and to play for some long-term compensation. But it's still, you know, it's in a primitive phase. It will improve. Eventually, it will improve, and that's why I say only best player will be able to beat the best computer at his best day. Over there.
Pedia só é que fosse a última, porque temos que ir para o intervalo.
Yeah, I can hear. First move. So, no, sticking with statistics, white in chess, making first move in chess, is not as significant as in tennis. The statistics are about 55-45 in white's favor. But when you make a first move, it's as always, you know, you can choose the strategy, so you can lead it for a while. But obviously, you know, in chess, it doesn't have the same advantage as in other games. But still, white is white, and it gives you some sort of strategic advantage if you know how to use it.